Hey everyone, and welcome. Think about this. For a lot of us, writing was basically homework, right? Something you did on your own, outside of class. But what if we started treating writing less like an assignment and more like a skill that we actively teach and build right there in the classroom? Well, today we're going to break down exactly how to do that. So let's just kick things off with a big question. Is writing really just a way to practice grammar? For a long time, the answer was pretty much yes. But we now know there is so much more to it, and that's what we're going to dive into. Here's our game plan. We'll start by rethinking what writing is all about in the first place. Then we'll get into the why, the real reasons to teach it. We'll cover some super important planning questions, walk through a practical 7-step model you can actually use, and wrap it all up with the crucial role of feedback. Okay, first up, the big idea here is all about a mental shift. It's about moving away from seeing writing as just another task and really starting to see it for what it is, a complex skill that needs, actual instruction and practice. Think about it like learning to play the guitar or kicking a soccer ball. You wouldn't just hand someone a guitar and expect a masterpiece, right? You need support or scaffolding. You need tons of practice, and you absolutely need good feedback. Writing is the exact same. It's about the whole process, not just that final finished page. So that brings us to the big why. If we're saying writing is way more than just grammar drills, then what are the actual reasons we should be dedicating our precious class time to it? Well, for starters, yeah, of course it's great for practicing grammar and vocab, but it's also key for teaching specific sub-skills, like how to build a good paragraph or link ideas together. It's our chance to introduce different kinds of writing, like, say, a resume. It can build fluency through things like free writing, and maybe most importantly, it opens up this huge door for creativity and self-expression. So, you're on board. You're ready to teach writing as a skill. Awesome. But where do you start? Well, the planning stage is everything, and it really just begins with asking yourself a few really important questions. First question, and it's a big one. Should you use a model text? Giving students a great example to look at and learn from. This one decision can honestly shape your entire lesson. Let's look at the trade-offs. On one hand, a model text gives students a really clear roadmap. It helps avoid that feeling of just guessing. But on the flip side, it can sometimes box them in a little, maybe limiting their own creative voice. There's no single right answer here. It really depends on what you want your students to achieve in that specific lesson. Next up, do we have students write all by themselves or together? Now, a lot of real-world writing is a solo mission, for sure, but the learning process, that can get a huge boost from collaboration. Getting students to work together is amazing for brainstorming ideas, supporting each other, and practicing how to give good feedback. Okay, this one is absolutely crucial. What should you be doing while your students are actually writing? It turns out that helping them write in the moment, prompting an idea, pointing back to the model text, making a quick correction, that is so much more effective than just covering their final paper in red ink later on. And finally, we have to ask, who are they writing for and why? I mean, think about it. If you don't know your audience or your purpose, writing feels kind of pointless and difficult, right? Well, it's the same for our students. When they have a clear reader and goal in mind, it makes the whole task so much easier and helps them make smart choices about style and structure. All right, we've wrestled with the big planning questions. Now let's put it all together. Let's look at a practical, step-by-step blueprint you can use to build a really successful writing lesson. Okay, this 7-step model is gold. You can kind of think of it in 3 main phases. The first phase is all about preparation. You introduce the context, the topic, the purpose, the audience, and then you show them that model text. Next up is the analysis phase. Here, you guide them to look at the big picture, the macro features, like how the paragraphs are organized. Then you zoom into the micro features, the specific grammar, the vocabulary, those little connecting words like however or in addition. And that brings us to the final phase, creation and reflection. Now it's their turn to write, to apply everything they've learned. Afterwards, they share their work and get feedback from their peers. And the whole thing wraps up with your focused feedback and a solid follow-up task. And that brings us perfectly to our last and maybe most important piece of the puzzle, feedback. How do we respond to student writing in a way that actually helps them grow without completely crushing their confidence? The absolute key here is balance. Yes, spelling and grammar are important, we all know that, but they're just one part of the whole picture. Really great feedback has to also look at the content of their ideas, the organization of their text, and maybe most importantly, it has to consider the student's motivation. You know, there's a quote from the source material that just hits this nail on the head. It says that if our feedback is only about fixing errors, the student's actual message, the thing they were trying so hard to say, gets totally ignored. And that can be incredibly demotivating. It sends a pretty clear signal that how they wrote something mattered more than what they had to say.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? It's simple, really. Writing isn't just something to be corrected, it's a skill to be built over time. And students get better, they really improve, when they get to experience the whole process, from brainstorming and drafting, all the way to sharing and getting meaningful feedback.
So that leaves us with one final thought to take with you. Looking at all these ideas, how will you take writing in your classroom and turn it from just another assignment into a really dynamic, skill-building experience for your students? Thanks so much for joining me.